welcome to Life Coaching on the Move. My name is Fiske and I am your host of this confidence building self-development podcast. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. I'm really excited that you found it and that you're giving it a try. This is me. I talk from the heart. I haven't written anything. I don't edit. You just hear me talking as I'm usually doing other things such as walking the dog and things like that. You come along with me really. If you are a regular listener, you know that, and welcome back. Thank you so much for coming back. Just a quick intro really, because it's a long podcast episode today. Today's is all about resilience, how to bend and not break, how to cope and bounce back from adversity. Strategies, I think there are about 7 or 8 strategies for you to use. Excuse me, that was the ironing. For you to use in your everyday life. That's proof that I don't edit. And how to, or if you're not going through anything difficult at the moment, how you can start building it now, ready if or when life throws you a curveball. So I'm going to go straight into it. All I would ask, a little bit of admin, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please spread the word. Word is getting out, the following and the listeners are going up and up and up, which is great because it means more people are benefiting from some of the key learnings, and it may make a difference in their life. If you know of anybody that could benefit from some confidence work and some help, really, it's worth telling them about this free podcast. They can listen to it whenever they feel the need, wherever they are. Also with that, over half the population still do not know how to listen to podcasts, where to find them, how to download them. So you do, I know that now. So perhaps help them, perhaps download it for them or get it up on their device or show them where to get it. It's on all sorts of about 7 different platforms: Spotify, Anchor, Apple, all of the main ones, Stitcher, which I didn't know about, and various ones. So help them along a little bit, or just put it up with maybe a screenshot on your social media and say that you've enjoyed it, you found it helpful, and others might want to listen too. Thank you for that. I'm going to go straight now into resilience and how to bend and not break. Today's podcast, I'm focusing on resilience, our inner resilience. What do I mean by that? Well, really, I'm referring to our ability to bounce back, that kind of hardiness or our inner strength, our ability to cope, our ability to not only sort of strive and get through, but also our ability to thrive under difficulties, because that old saying of what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, it can be so true. Every opportunity or every difficulty can be seen as an opportunity to learn something about yourself, learn something about your coping strategies. Sometimes when we're going through a tough time, we learn something about our friends as well, how many warriors we've got out there for us, where our support is, and who we can rely on. But more importantly, this today is more really about your inner resilience, your inner ability to cope, to bounce back, to handle things, move forward, come out the other side sooner, less scarred, and much more able to cope with other things in the future. And actually, I see, many challenges and difficulties and hard times, although they are at the time difficult, painful, upsetting, life-changing, some of them. Although that is true, that is life. Life is full of those opportunities and challenges. But they're also a gift sometimes. Not always. I mean, they're often not things you would wish to happen. They're not things you would design if you were in a sort of control room. But when you look back, when you've come out the other side and you reflect, there can be a silver lining. There can be, what did that terrible situation bring you? Well, on reflection, it brought me that close friend that I've now got. We used to be just quite distant friends, not very deep, but now we're much deeper level because they were there for me and we got through it together, for example. So the gift was a new and much deeper and much more meaningful friendship or relationship, let's say, because I don't know what difficulties you are going through. So one of the tips of getting us through the difficult times and the difficult challenges may be to try and see the good somewhere in it. What is the potential silver lining? It may be small, but it's worth hanging on to. Okay, so that's one good outlook. But there are other strategies for us to bend and not break. Often when I'm running this workshop in teams, because if you are part of a team, in fact, if you're a team leader and a manager, it is really, really worth focusing on your team's resilience or your department's resilience, or if you're running a small company, the company resilience of all of you as a group. Because the more resilient people are, the much more likely to turn up for work. They're far less likely to phone in sick because of stress, and things have got on top of them, they're not coping, and they'll call in sick, for example. So it is financially worth investing, by the way, this was a side thing, I wasn't planning to say this, it is worth investing in resilience work, whether that's departmentally on one of your team meetings, to actually talk about it, to actually make it a word, a buzzword in your team or your company or part of your company ethos. Because if you do openly talk about it, and it is a word in your vocabulary amongst your team, then you're all talking the same language, you're all pulling together, you can all address it together. You can do work as a team to look at your inner resilience as a team, your ability to all cope and bounce back. I don't know, when maybe you've lost a contract or you've lost a key customer, or markets and government things have changed things, and pricing structures and policies have changed. Whatever it is, sometimes as a team or a company, external factors come into play that aren't in your control. And so you as a company or a section have got to pull together. You've got to come through. You've got to be adaptable. You've got to make adaptations to change and go with whatever the external factors have presented you with. It's the same with families. There's a family inner resilience. How are you all as a family going to come through this challenge, your latest challenge that you may as a whole be going through, for example? And it's a word that's not often used. It's certainly not often used in the family, around the breakfast table, for example, but it is worth using it. It is worth, with your children, fostering it, encouraging it, addressing it, talking about it. When they've been turned down by the football team, they haven't made it into the A squad or something like that, and they're upset, it's worth actually using the words and talking about their resilience. How are you going to cope with this? How are you going to respond to this? In fact, actually, the other day I was running a workshop, a confidence workshop, and I was talking about the fact that the difference between a confident person and a not such confident person is really what they're saying in their head. If they believe they can in themselves and they're prepared to push themselves forward, they're much more confident, and they will try more opportunities and put themselves forward for more activities. And I was saying that the difference therefore is what they're saying in their head or not saying in their head, or that they're saying unhelpful things in their head, such as, I can't do that, I won't be as good as others, they won't want me, they won't pick me, I won't be successful, what if I fail, and so on. And one story, I may have said this on the podcast, one example that I give to make that come alive is I'll say, so the difference between one confident person and one not so confident person is not necessarily their skill set, it's their ability to push themselves forward and take risk and try. And somewhere, the difference between one person going up on the X Factor stage and auditioning, no matter what their skills, and another is what they're saying in their head. And that somewhere in this country there's a whole load of phenomenal singers or phenomenal athletes or actors and actresses or performers who will never see, they'll only ever stay singing in the shower because they don't believe in themselves and they're not saying the right things in their heads, and therefore won't take the risk of push themselves forward and audition as somebody else might. And one of the participants in the workshop said, yes, but what happens if they genuinely can't sing, but they're telling themselves they can, and they get up there and audition and they get turned down? And here is a classic of what we're talking about now, which is how do they cope? How do they bounce back from that? And where is their inner resilience? But I was talking mostly about confidence at this workshop. So I said to the participant, now that comes down to us individually on our coping strategies, how we cope with things. And the fact is that we are not always in control of what happens to us, or the team, or the family, or whatever, in terms of the subject of resilience, but we are in control of our reaction to it. And so if it is your daughter or son that's auditioning for X Factor and they get turned down and they're absolutely devastated because they've believed they can sing and they've told themselves they're going to be the next big hit, and they've got to get down from that stage after being rejected, now it comes down to their inner resilience and how they cope and how they bounce back and how they choose to react to this situation. And that actually is what it all comes down to. How do we respond to things ordinarily? What is our go-to kind of approach? What is our inner strengths when we have got to cope with disappointment, difficulty, challenge, and so on? And so I was explaining to the participant that it's now down to that individual to respond in the way to respond in the best possible way that they can, in the ideal world, that is. And I was saying they can either sit in the mud and the quagmire and feel sorry for themselves and lick their wounds for a long, long time, get very down, very low. That might be one response. The other extreme to that is they may take it on board and decide, oh, okay, I gave it a shot. Well done you for giving it a shot. No worries. I'll move on. I'll try something else. I'll try acting, or I'll try totally different, whatever. That's another possible response. Or they may decide, actually, because sometimes challenges can make us, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Sometimes it can make us more determined even. That's one reaction in terms of resilience. And that has happened. I think there have been at least 2 cases where a former applicant on the X Factor was turned down. I can't remember at what stage they were turned down, whether it was the initial auditions or whether it was once they got to judges' houses, or even they were runners up in the show, but they've not succeeded, they've not won the X Factor, but they have come back a year or 2 later and they've come back stronger, better able to sing, better stage presence, better self-confidence, self-belief, just all round better performer, and they have won. And I think that has happened at least twice in the history of the UK X Factor, to my knowledge. I don't know about all the other countries. But that is just a small example because she raised it. So it is down to us as individuals to choose whatever reaction is going to be the most helpful for us. We don't always choose the best reaction. Actually, sometimes we make a complete hash of it and choose an awful reaction. We may stay in that mud for far too long. We may get bitter, we may get angry, we may get resentful of the world, we may get depressed. Is that a good reaction? Is that helping us? Is it helping us move forward? Is it helping us to live life to the full? Is it helping us to come out stronger, more wiser, more empathetic, more compassionate to others, more self-aware? No. So one of the takeaways from today is reflect. How have you historically to date coped with adversity? How have you coped with difficulty to date? Have you done well? And when I say well, that sounds judgmental. I don't mean to add judgment to that, but in a way, I suppose I'm asking you to reflect back and judge it for yourself. Now you're out the other side and that big challenge is behind you. Did you cope with it those experiences, those histories that you've got? Did you cope with them on reflection now in the cold light of day as best you could have? Were there other possible reactions? Could you have come through sooner? Could you have come through wiser and stronger? Are you really proud and pleased? And actually, on reflection, no, I did do really, really well. I mean, that's brilliant. And if that is the case, how did you do it? What did you do? What did you draw on? How did you bounce back sooner and well and strong and more armed, in fact, for future challenges? Because that's the trick, isn't it? If we can get through difficult times, whether it's broken relationships, redundancies, disappointments at work, customers let you down, difficulties at school or college if you're younger, or difficulties with your children at school or college, or with their friendship groups, financial difficulties and setbacks, or all sorts of things that we have to cope with. I mean, there are millions of possible things, health things, all sorts. Did you, on reflection, have a good reaction to it? Was it speedy? Was it empowering? Was it proactive? Did you take responsibility for your reaction, or did you go into victim mentality? Did you go into survivor mentality and how best to cope with it? Or did you feel sorry for yourself, throw pity parties? As I've heard, I listen to an American podcast quite a lot, and she refers to it as a pity party. Who wants to go to a pity party? I certainly don't. Who wants to host one? I would hate to think that I was hosting my own pity party. That's not a phrase I would normally use, but actually that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? Because it's quite a visual thing where you can really draw on what she means there. So I know I wouldn't want to do that. I don't think you would. I don't think, because the fact that you're listening to this podcast means that you are very open to change. You're very open to personal development and self-reflection and self-awareness. So I don't think that is the case for you. Or if you are in the midst of that, and that's why you're listening to the podcast, you're having a tough time in life right now, is there an element of self-pity? Could you have a chat with yourself and turn yourself more into a warrior? How can I cope with this? How am I going to get myself out? I need to get out of this mud, move on, shake off the mud and all of the bits that I'm carrying around about this issue, and move on and put it behind me. So there are different ways of trying to build and work on your resilience, because who doesn't want a little bit more resilience in their toolkit? Because you may not be going through a tough time at the moment. That's brilliant, and I hope that stays as it is. If there is something that comes left field, out of the blue, and that you find yourself in, if you have already got yourself a little toolkit of stronger resilience, more accessibility to your resilience, then you're going to be able to be better armed for the future. So this cannot be a waste of time. Also, if you're in a family, it can help you in terms of passing it out to your family, and this will have a filter effect out to those around you. If you're part of a team leader, running a company, or you're on a committee, or you run a social group, or a class, or you attend a class, this could become just language that you all use. I don't think it's a word that we use very much at all, actually. I certainly don't think it's a word that my teenagers use, and they're sports, they're into sport, they're competitive, they've got good friendship groups, but I don't think I've ever heard either of them use the word resilience. I was resilient today, Mum, or that they weren't very resilient, Mum, or whatever. So I do think there is room for this word to be used more. And this strength to be aimed for more, and for the trait to be developed, because you can't have too much resilience, I don't believe, but you can have too little. So one way of developing our resilience is to make really good connections, have a really good support network around you. And that's always, and I say this, that's always two-way, because it makes us better able to cope if we're used to giving to others. If we're good at giving and supporting and being there for others, it makes it far easier for us to ask for that same support in return. But it also makes us more empathetic because we've seen what others are going through. We're more likely to cope with emotions because we're used to handling them with others, etc., etc. So get yourself a stronger two-way support network. And that does take effort. It does require some time and effort, but it is so worth it. You know, don't keep going home from work, closing the door, drawing the curtains, and staying in and watching Netflix for 3 hours. We've got to get out there. We've got to take that risk and extend a little invite to them and suggest, you know, some people you might get on with at work, but it's just a work level friendship. You might have a coffee at work, you might sit and have a sandwich with them at lunchtime, but you've never ever socialised with them outside of work. You've never taken it to that next level. Well, I would say swallow hard, take the bull by the horns, take it to that next level. Suggest that I was thinking of joining so-and-so new gym around the corner. Do you fancy joining it? Perhaps we'll go there together and see what the membership fee is. You know, you just lead the way, just show some initiative, lead the way. It takes one person to take a risk, extend some kind of invitation. You know, the weather's on the turn. They say it's going to be a really nice weekend. I thought I might get the barbecue out this weekend. Would you and your other half fancy coming round and we'll throw some burgers on the barbecue and get some beers going? Or there's a match on at the weekend, you know, big England or whatever your team is or your game is, big match on the TV. Why don't you come round? We'll get pizzas, do some pizzas and watch take a risk. Take a risk and get that friendship to the next level. Once you've invited them round for pizza, now it's down to them. It may get reciprocated. You might end up meeting a couple of their mates or something that they do in return, or they meet some of your friends that you also include, and your social network widens. And don't think it's that they're going to reject you. Don't start doing that negative self-talk, in case you are. It may well be that they're shyer and less confident than you. It may well be that they're desperate that somebody sort of takes the lead, that they would love to have that. So just take the risk, because we don't know what's going on in other people's lives and their stuff and their insecurities. I do know, having worked with thousands of people, that most of us do have some insecurities, some self-doubt, some wobbles. But when we're shown an act of kindness or something like that, unless we're excruciatingly shy and that throws us into complete terror, most of us will, if they can and have the availability, will come along. And that's it. You're now different friends. You're more than just acquaintances at work, for example. If you're a mum and you've got young children, it might be similar with one of the mums in the playground. Take that risk. Suggest, would you like to come round for a cup of tea and a piece of cake before school pickup this afternoon, or come back for a coffee, or I was going to pop into town. Are you busy? Do you want to come into town? We'll go for a coffee, or something like that. Extend that hand out, because you never know when they are desperately lonely, they're struggling, they're having a hard time, or they're just not competent and confident socially, and they would love someone to extend that hand of friendship, especially new mums when we're all struggling and adjusting with new motherhood. It's great to have another new mum to talk to. So if you're at a mum and toddler group with all your young babies and you're all wanting to sort of talk about the whys and wherefores of weaning or something like that, it's great if you just extend that hand out. So give it a try. If there's a second takeaway from today, it's take a risk and invite someone to something, or suggest something to someone different that you've never done it to before. And it could be that this time next episode you've got yourself a new, deeper friendship with somebody that was in your perimeter but not very far in. So that's one thing, because the more social networks we've got, the more support we've got out there. It's a bit like investing money for a rainy day. You're much more likely to be able to cope with that rainy day if you've got a little bit of backup. If you've got no savings whatsoever, and the car breaks down, or you get a massive 2 tyres blow out on a pothole or something, that can throw you into a complete turmoil, because there's no backup, there's no support that you've got yourself or been able to financially put in place. So it can be a massive ordeal, that, compared to if you've got a little bit of backup and some savings. In a similar way with investing in friendships, you've got people to turn to. They have somebody now that they can turn to in you, and that makes our lives much, much richer, if we want to carry on with the money analogy. So invest time and yourself in developing stronger relationships. I may have said this before, but statistically, and research shows that if you can name only 3 or less really good friendships that you know you could call upon in the middle of the night for any kind of real problem, for support, or you could go and sit down and flood your heart out to, or you could go and ask, is there any chance you could loan me some money because I'm absolutely stuffed and in dire straits? 3 or less people like that you can name, that you could genuinely turn to in a really difficult time. Then if you compare that with people who can name 3 and more than 3 names of people that they could genuinely do that to, you will live less time. So I haven't explained that at all well. Let me say all that again. If you can name more than 3 people, on average, you are likely to live 8 years longer than a person who can only name 3 or less. So if you've just got 3 strong friendships like that or less, you need to get some more for longevity in your life. Others are likely to live 8 years longer. So it is worth it. It is truly, truly worth investing in friendships. Another way of building your resilience is to avoid seeing and viewing and framing crises in your mind as insurmountable problems. It's true that often you can't actually change the stressful event itself. Sometimes they're way out of our control, the event. That is what makes it so stressful much of the time. But as I've already said, you can decide how to interpret it and how to respond to it. So, you've got to be mindful of putting it in the right place in your head. If you see it as an insurmountable problem, it truly will be an insurmountable problem. If you are one of these people that believes everything's got a solution, there's a solution out there for me somewhere, I've just got to find it, I've got to think my way around this, how can I get over this, how can I get around this, how can I break it down, how can I solve this, then you are much more likely to. So there is a large element of mindset in resilience. Pretty much most of it, actually. But in terms of reducing it down and getting some context and avoiding seeing every crisis as an insurmountable problem, avoiding crumbling and going to pieces as soon as something doesn't go quite right for you. So it is a mindset, and choose the right mindset. Choose the right stuff that you're saying in your head. And when you are really low and you are really struggling, then have a little chat with yourself. Am I seeing this as insurmountable? And if so, what's that doing here? If I could see that there was a solution, what might that solution be? Where is the solution? Let me find ways around this. How can I make this a little bit better? How can I make this a little bit more tolerable? How can I find my way around this? How can we as a group, whoever that is, family, friends, business, how can we as a group come out the other side sooner? What do we need to do to move on from this? Also accept that these sorts of things are part of life. What we resist persists. If we are trying to resist problems and negative events, and we want life to be, who doesn't want life to be consistently rosy? That's fine. But if we resist something, it will persist. So we've just got to accept, okay, I'm having a bit of a tough time. It's my turn to have a bit of a tough time. This is part of life. I'm still alive. I've still got those people around me. I've still got the roof over my head. Hopefully, that's all of those things aren't part of the struggle that you've got. See the good. See that you've still got food on the table or the roof over your head or whatever. And accept that this is part of life, that it will be solvable, that this time next year you'll be out the other side, or this time in 5 years life will feel better. You know, talk to yourself in your head, as we do all the time. We've mentioned that a lot. We accept that we chat away to ourselves non-stop. Just make sure that that chatter is saying helpful things and keeping you on track. So acceptance is half the battle. If we accept things, and you hear this, don't you, in the grieving process, when we're grieving or when we're coming to terms with something awful like a diagnosis in our health. Acceptance is part of that journey, and it's a major milestone to you coming out the other side. So accept this challenge is just part of life. That you won't be the only one to have gone through it, that people will have gone through very similar and much, much worse, undoubtedly, times, and that you can survive, depending on what hopefully, in the run of the mill, that you will cope and you will come out the other side. So again, it's about mindset. Now, the fourth way of building your resilience is to have some goals, is to move towards your goals. Now, I was reading some sort of writing of people who have been through some terrible times, whether it was victims of massive natural disasters, whether it was victims of torture, from sort of torture, quite literally being prisoners in camps and things like that. I was reading sort of histories of Auschwitz survivors, and all of those. I've been looking at this a lot, and what are the common threads in terms of their resilience, and how did they cope with these horrendous times of being held captive and being tortured and beaten and absolutely cruelly treated. And one common theme that comes through that is that they work towards their goals. They may not be able to sit and write goals in the traditional way that we coaches advise, write down SMART goals. No, not like that, but in their heads they had goals. I will get out of here, and when I do, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to fulfill that dream and this bucket list. And I that's perhaps why people talk about bucket lists, because they've got goals to aim for. I want to one day climb Kilimanjaro. I want to one day walk the such and such route. We need these dreams stroke goals. We've got to have things to look forward to. We've got to have some positive in there. So we need to develop realistic goals and make steady progress towards them. So if you're going through a tough time, you've got to move job, move house, sell up, or cope with things through the children's school, or your difficult times, or your employment, your job, or your business, whatever it is, make realistic goals. And each day, step by step, start making progress in those goals. Because the minute you see progress, albeit even if it's tiny progress, it is nonetheless progress. And it is moving you away from the difficulties, moving you away to solutions and a better future. And as I've said before, us humans feel so much better when we feel an element of control. So, although what you might be going through feels completely out of your control, you feel a victim to it all, if you can set some small, bite-sized goals, you will feel so much better. You will feel you're coping, and you will feel you're making progress, and you will feel you can see daylight at the end of the tunnel, and that you are going to come out the other side. So that's, I think, I've lost numbers now. Is that about 5 that we've taken? That I've given you 5, I think. Another one, let's say 6, is to take some decisive action. Don't just, this is on the back of the last one really, don't just wish. You can't wish a problem away. I wish this would get better. When's this going to get better? You've got to do things that start moving that forward. Take some action to solve it. Believe that everything has a solution. Believe that there's a way out of this. Be clear and take decisive little steps. I was going to say have goals. That's great to have goals. And when you can, if you're not being held sort of in a prison camp and being tortured, when you can actually have some control over what you do, then the next step is to take those decisive steps, take action. Another thing to do, resilient people are found to be much more self-aware. They're much more likely and happy, feel comfortable to look within. They're more open to self-awareness. And that's a great thing. So if you look for opportunities for self-discovery, and I think you are that kind of person, that's why you're listening to a personal development podcast. So you're halfway there, I feel. I know I don't know you, but I suspect there is a massive openness to you. Because those people that are more closed off are less likely to listen to something like this. I'm not saying just to me, but something along these lines, because they may have more of a closed mindset. So with your open mindset, look for opportunities for self-discovery. So if you are having a tough time at the moment, and we've got to remember that what doesn't break us strengthens us, learn something about yourself after each stressful situation and add it to your resilience bank, to your mental, emotional resilience bank of strengths. So if you hear interviews with people who've been through tough times, that they pretty much always say that they learnt something about themselves. And that's great. That's a good thing. That's the gift that can come out of these awful things. They'll often say they have better relationships, greater sense of personal strength because they got themselves through it. They often have increased self-worth. And often you'll hear them say as well that they've developed more spirituality. All of those things have got to be a good thing. I was actually just this week, I've just realised, listening to an interview with Alex Stanson, a phenomenal women's hockey player. She was part of the Team GB squad that won gold for us in the last Olympics. She's a great, great hockey player. And she was talking about actually a tough time that she'd had just a year or 2 years ago, about 18 months ago, when she had a horrible head injury. Not during a hockey match, not anything to do with hockey actually, completely unrelated. She was on holiday with her husband, or then boyfriend, I guess, was in a restaurant. He said something really funny. She was sort of squashed in the corner, her seat was in the corner. She leaned forward to sort of belly laugh and then threw her head back in laughter and whacked her head really hard on the brick wall right behind her. And she is still recovering 18 months later from that head injury. She went through a terrible time. At one point she lost the ability of speech. She couldn't be around people. She couldn't tolerate sounds, any sounds at all, whether it was just somebody talking to her. Lights, she had to be in a dark room for long periods of time. Terrible, terrible headaches. She basically hasn't seen her team for months and months and months, and she's just making a comeback. But what she said in all of this, although it's been horrendous and she lost lots of fitness and she had a terrible time, she said that in all of this, what had come of it were really strong relationships. She realized that actually the one and only person that she really wanted to be with for any short period of time, because she could barely be with people or talk to them or process anything or cope with any conversation, the one person was her boyfriend. And they have since then, in the last 18 months, got married and have a phenomenally, he has been an absolute rock for her, really there for her. And as I'll just throw this in actually, he made her every day say, I am getting better. I am coming out of this. My body is healing. I'm making progress. And she said on the interview, I hated it at first. I don't want to say it. And he would make me every morning say it. And then she began to take it on board. And she believes that genuinely helped her when she changed her mindset about it and decided, I've got to get out of this. I've got to get over this. That she really began to improve. I would just add that since she recorded that interview, she has actually announced that she is retiring from hockey. But I suspect that is because she was obsessed. She lived, slept, drank, just lived for hockey. She was absolutely, in her own words, obsessed with it, completely dedicated to it, and had been since a young teen. But I think through this illness, she says she found so much more in life, so much more about friendships, relationships, her phenomenal family that stood by her, just so much more in life that she realised she was quite tunnel vision and sort of one-dimensional, and now she's had so much more open up for her. So that was how she reacted. That was the inner resilience she dug deep and found. And she has said herself that she learnt so much about herself, so much about her family, her friendships, the strength and her love for her now husband and their relationship. So, and that's from a completely, totally dedicated, phenomenally committed, one-dimensional athlete, basically, gold-winning athlete who was up at God knows what hour every morning training before anything else happened in the day. She gave her life to it. And that's how she's bounced back. That's the inner resilience she's used in that adversity and come out stronger, happier, and she says richer in life as a result of it. Now, she could have seen herself as a victim. Why me? Why did this have to happen? It's not fair. I was about to go to the next Olympics, etc. But she is not responding that way. We always can choose our response. So look for your opportunities of self-discovery. See what it's telling you about you. What have you found out about you and learnt about your strengths? And then from that, the next one is to nurture a positive view of yourself. You've got to develop the confidence around your ability now your newly found awareness of how you cope and where your inner resilience is, or your team, or in your family, whatever. And develop a confidence around that ability to solve problems and trusting your instincts to help you build your resilience. So you build on what you've learned about yourself. It gives you that in the bank. You mentally have that in your bank. You know that now that you can cope with things. She says, I know I can cope with anything. No matter what life throws at me, I can cope because I've got through this. And that's what it can show us. The other thing is to keep things in perspective. How big is this issue in reality? It may feel all absorbing and overwhelming and hideous right now, but in the scale of things, will it be big in, say, 3 months? Will it still be significant and large in 6 months? Will it this time next year even sort of form a memory? Will it be important? Will you recall it, or will you have to dig deep to try and even remember it? Hopefully you said the latter. Hopefully it is small, and when you have the benefit of foresight and think, this time in a year this really will pale into insignificance. If that's the case, put it into perspective and react accordingly. Don't overreact because it really is quite small now that you've looked at it that way. Or will it still be really significant in a year? And if that's the case, then you're facing something that's large, hefty, and difficult. That's fine. But we can still dig deep and find things and find silver linings and find things about ourselves and find some solutions to help and improve things and so on. Still got to have that hope. So one of the key things to solving the problems and facing the adversity is to first weigh up how significant, how large and the issue is, and get it into some kind of perspective. So that will help, because many times they're much smaller really than we think they are. They feel big at the time, of course they do, but in reality, it will be over soon. That reminds me of yesterday. Actually, we took the day off yesterday, my husband and I, and we decided that we would take the dog down to the South Downs and do one of our little organised walks. When I say organised, I mean a pre-routed walk that is on the OS extracts, and it's already written out and signposted and stuff like that. So my husband had picked a 9.5-mile route. He downloaded a new app. We won't take a map this time, we'll use this app. And we'll walk for about 3 hours. That should take us just under 3 hours with the dog. And then I've booked us, so we'll set off after we've taken the children to school, set off, leisurely do the walk. And then there's a really nice restaurant in this village, and high ratings, and we'll go for a nice, well-earned lunch. And that sounded absolutely idyllic. Great day, I thought. However, we didn't take into consideration, foolishly probably, and you're probably all thinking, well, that was obvious. A, the weather was atrocious, absolutely dire. We found out that our clothes were not sufficient insofar as both of our waterproof trousers were not actually waterproof at all. In fact, all of our waterproof clothes failed us after 3.5 or more hours. It took us a lot longer than we were anticipating, predominantly because, trust me, if you're using an app on a phone in pouring rain, it doesn't work very well. Neil forgot to take his gloves with him, so his hands were bitterly cold using the app. But at every junction of every signpost, we had to keep getting the phone out, referring to the app, trying to find out where we were on it, with freezing cold hands, with a wet screen. The phone was getting soaking wet, couldn't see it properly either because it's soaking wet. It was just disastrous. So not only were we really struggling, the rain stroke sleet on our face was bitterly cold on our face and skin hurt, water running down my neck, soaked to the skin where our clothes had failed us, and we were in walking boots, not wellies, walking shoes, boots, and we'd forgotten, of course, it's been raining on and off pretty much solidly here in the UK for about the last God knows how many months, to the point where many houses and villages and areas in the UK are literally under rivers of water. Houses, people have been evacuated from their homes. There are red alerts, flood alerts still in place now, and as I speak it is pelting with rain outside, and we are just in the midst of Storm Jorge, the third storm we've had in the same number of weeks, I think. I'd forgotten all of that the ground would be waterlogged, drenched, muddy, slippy, at times almost impassable. Many times we were wading through thick, gloopy mud and deep puddles that we couldn't, that were going over our shoes. So actually our walking boots were no longer walking boots, they were waders. My feet were wading in cold, muddy water. And halfway through, I lost the will to live and said, can we please just detour and just stop now and get to the car? The dog was soaked and shivering. She's a spaniel. I've never seen her shiver before. Poor little thing was wet through and stood quivering. But when we looked at this very unhelpful app that failed us most of the way, and we'll never use again, we realised there was no shortcut. The only way we could get back was to continue on that same circular route. There wasn't anywhere, we weren't near a road, we couldn't get on a bus, we couldn't get a taxi. We were out in the midst of the South Downs, nowhere near anything, and we had to keep going. At which point a switch went on in my head. Just prior to that, I was ready to bail. Very keen to let's give up now, this is mad and insane and not enjoyable, we're meant to be having a nice day off together. So that was my mindset. Once I saw on there that there was no solution, and so I got things into perspective and realised, right, it's all in perspective, we've got to carry on, there's nothing we can do. I kind of dug deep and went marching off at a pace, thinking, let's just get this over, the sooner the better. And in fact, we actually started to, at times where we could, jog some of it just to speed up the torture and to warm us up and to warm the dog up. So a switch went on in my mind of, right, we've just got to get on and do this, and let's just get on and do this. Let's take action, I guess is what I'm saying. Let's move forward. Let's dig deep and just sort it out. And actually, by the time we got to the car and got clean clothes on and dry, and I dried the dog off and given us some food and stuff, we had such a lovely meal, such a lovely lunch, a well-earned lunch. And food never tastes nicer than when you really feel you deserve it and you've worked up that appetite and you've been through some hardship to get it. It just tastes so much better. I think they could have served me anything and I would have enjoyed it. We were starving, but we were now warm, dry, and feeling a tiny bit smug and proud of ourselves, I have to say. And it is a walk, actually, that had we gone on nice weather and looked at the lovely scenery, which we've done a lot, we've walked a lot of the miles of the South Down, it is gorgeous, and we would have enjoyed it. I think we'll remember that walk, perhaps for the wrong reasons, maybe not, much more so than we would have normally. So good and bad, we learnt a lot. We learnt stuff about ourselves, that we were tough. We had a little toast at lunchtime and we congratulated each other and said, well done. And actually, I think probably now on reflection, it was enjoyable in a weird kind of way. Wouldn't want to do it again and would plan better. But we've learnt that. We've learnt loads from it. We would get better gear and clothes. We would get a proper mat in a plastic cover. We would be more organised, and we would better plan in terms of weather and what it was going to be like and make a better decision. So we learnt loads and we felt good afterwards about it. So we kept perspective. And I know I'm not talking about life-changing events here. In terms of the walk isn't a life-changing event, but it is a small little story that sort of backs up what I'm saying. It sort of brings into context what I'm trying to get across here. So there are about 6 or 7 ways that we can all learn a bit of resilience. Another way, I've lost count, is to maintain an optimistic view or a hopeful outlook. You know, when I was reading the survivors' accounts of Auschwitz and torture and things like that, they said that the one thing they were in control of was where their mind went. They could be physically beaten or starved or handcuffed to a radiator or whatever it was, but no one at all had any control over their mind and where they took themselves in the mind. And another common theme from all of them was that they kept an optimistic outlook, that they believed that one day they would be free or one day life would get better. And they would spend time thinking about that. I think one I was reading used to visualize and dream of walking along barefoot on a beautiful warm sandy beach in paradise kind of view. So it's, you know, you've got to maintain an optimistic outlook, and it enables you to sort of expect, therefore, that things will happen in your life. Try visualizing what you want rather than worrying about what you fear. Try visualizing how things could be in the future rather than how bad they are now. Sort of go on ahead in the future so that you know it won't always be like this. That gives you hope, that gives you optimism, that keeps you sane. So do take that on board. Another way of building your inner resilience, of course, is to look after yourself. If you're not going through difficulties now, or you are going through difficulties now, just look after yourself, because the stronger we are, both physically and mentally, and when I say look after yourself, I mean in both ways. We've talked about we are much more than just mind and body. The two are massively interlinked, so look after both sides. And of course, that means you are much tougher, much stronger, more able to cope with things if and when they happen. Hopefully they won't, but if they do, you are mentally strong and you're physically strong, and you will be able to get through sooner and more successfully. So be prepared and just develop those resilience strengths and traits. So there are loads of little tips there, loads of little tips. for you to start building your resilience no matter what you're going through now or not going through. It's definitely worth spending the time looking after you mentally and physically, looking after your friendships and investing time in them, learning with everything that you go through, good and bad, learning what did you know about yourself that you didn't already know, what did you use there, nurturing that positive view of yourself, nurturing your self-awareness, all of it. And I keep saying this, also do it for your team or your family or your group or whatever, because it is a strength that I think is undervalued and under-discussed and under-recognized. But my word, it can be such a trait to have when you need it. That ability to bend but not break, that's what we want. If you hold yourself a kebab stick, one of those little wooden kebab sticks that we can buy, if you put pressure on both ends, hold both ends and pull them down and pressurize both ends, it's rigid and it will snap and it will break. But if you play with a flexible rubber band and pull it back, and it will ping forward, it's flexible. It doesn't break unless you really massively stretch it beyond and don't release it. But if you pull a rubber band back, or an arrow in a bow and arrow, if you have to pull the arrow back and get that tension and that strain and stress on the, I'm sure there's a technical phrase, but on the cord or the part of the arrow, you've got to stress that, and then you let go and the arrow springs forward, shoots forward and hits the hopefully the bullseye on the target. So we are better when we're put under pressure and stress, under some pressure, and then we spring forward stronger and more on target to hit that bullseye. So don't try and avoid tough times. Don't be scared of tough times. I know we don't welcome them, but we do have to put ourselves under some pressure. We do have to take risks. Sometimes things will go wrong, but as long as you don't get hurt physically, or anybody get physically hurt and nobody dies, what's the worst that can happen? You learn something about yourself that will help you in the future. You move on. I hope that's been helpful today. I genuinely wish you well, and I genuinely do recommend that you put this into action. It's all very well listening to these podcasts, and it's great that you are, and you will pick snippets up, but the true learning is when you actually apply it, when you stop listening to this and you think, I'm going to apply this, I'm going to actually practice this, I'm going to use my book and make notes about my progress, I'm going to make notes about what has worked, what I've tried. I'm going to then be able to visibly see my progress in black and white over the next few weeks. And feel free to drop me a line and share it with me. Tell me what you've tried or what you're going through and how this has helped. And share it, because that's social connections, isn't it? So I wish you all well. If you do want some extra support, some one-to-one support, if you are going through a difficult time, or you want to learn more resilience and other things on top, any work that you want to do really, if you want to do a much greater depth one-to-one coaching, then please do feel free to contact me. You can contact me through the website, but it's got telephone numbers there, email addresses, contact me boxes. So the website is www.milestone-coaching.co.uk. Have a little look through the website. There's all sorts of things there available to you. And you can contact me, or just drop me an email now if you're sat next to your phone and want to spontaneously right now just drop me an email, then do. It's dawn@milestone-coaching.co.uk. Share your thoughts, or if you've got subjects you'd like me to cover in future podcasts, feel free to drop me a line. Other than that, I wish you all a really strong, resilient, happy week, and I'm really looking forward to speaking to you on next week's episode of Life Coaching on the Move.